Vine held a cup of coffee in her hand and entered the room of her boss, Jungkook. She entered without knocking, just like always. He was immersed in his work, but as soon as he saw her, he looked at her and smiled. Jungkook, good morning. Vine put the cup at the side table and bowed to him. Vine, good morning, sir. Jungkook raised his eyebrows while looking at her. Jungkook, since when did you start calling me sir? Vine, ever since you said you're not interested in our relationship. Jungkook thought for a few seconds before speaking. When did I say that? Vine, you don't need to speak. Your actions speak louder than words, she said while looking down, in a formal tone like talking to a boss. Jungkook closed his laptop and went to her. Holding her shoulder in one hand, he raised her chin from the other. He looked in her eyes and asked, what happened? Vine, nothing, she said and went outside. Jungkook started thinking what he did wrong this time, but he couldn't think of anything. He sighed and went behind her. Jungkook, Vine, where are you going? Vine, cooking dinner for you, sir. Would you like anything special? She asked while cutting the onions. He turned her around and picked her from her waist. He made her sit on the table and he stood between her legs. Jungkook, how would I know if you don't tell me? Fine. Let me go, sir. If I'm late in cooking dinner, you're going to scold me again. Jungkook, oh really? Then you will have to do something to make me feel good, he said while leaning closer to her. He didn't understand what was making her mad, so he started to make up for it already by lightening up her mood. Vine started as a maid in his house, but soon they started growing feelings for each other. They even had spent some night together and are thinking to marry each other. But Jungkook asked her to wait a few more months because of this important project that he's been dealing with. Because as long as this project isn't completed, he won't be able to give her any of his time. And he doesn't want to do that to his newly wed wife. He wants to give her full attention, and she agreed easily. In fact, told him to take all the time he needed. She is going to be there for him always. Jungkook, because you know what happens when I get mad, he said while smirking. Vine didn't speak anything, but her cheeks blushed, and he knew that she was easily going to give in. So he leaned in closer. His breath went warm against her skin as he whispered, Jungkook, do I have to remind you what happens when you play hard to get? Vine tried to push him away as she said, Sir, I'm trying to work here. Jungkook held her hands when she tried to push him away and said, Work? This work suits you better, he said and crashed his lips upon hers. He kissed her gently, making her gasp. Her eyes widened for a few seconds but then closed, and she kissed him back. Jungkook smiled inwardly and leaned up on her, making her lie down on the counter with his hand on the back of her head. He slowly started going rough, and she did the same back. They kept at it until they were out of breath and broke the kiss, but he didn't move too far away from her lips. He chuckled softly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Jungkook, you know, you're lucky I'm in a good mood. Otherwise, I might just have to punish you for ignoring me like that. Fine rolled her eyes. Her lips couldn't stop smiling. Fine. And how exactly are you going to punish me, sir? Jungkook winked at her and smirked. Jungkook, you know exactly how. Fine smiled widely and pushed him from his chest. She sat up on the table and then tried to stand down. But he came between her legs again and wrapped her hands around his own neck. He held her cheeks in his hands and asked, but seriously, what happened? Jungkook, are you angry because I couldn't give you enough time? I already told you, this project is going to take time. After this, I'm all yours. Fine. I'm not mad because you couldn't give me any time. I'm mad because you can't give yourself any time. Jungkook's eyes narrowed in confusion. Fine hit his forehead and raised her voice. Did you look at yourself in the mirror? Those eye bags and that tiredness in your whole body? I can't see it anymore. I wanted to make you smile and take some time off. Fine. I know if I simply told you to do it, you would never agree. That's why I had to do this. Can't you get an hour nap at least? You're making me mad now. She made a pout and crossed her arms. Jungkook made her face come closer and kissed her again. She couldn't get it. She tried to look at him, but he had no expressions, and his eyes were closed too. She didn't know what he was thinking. She didn't think much and gave up. She closed her eyes too and kissed him back. Suddenly, during the kiss, she felt water on her cheek that made her open her eyes. Was he crying? She looked at him, but he was too deeply immersed in the kiss. She couldn't see him. She kept kissing him until he broke the kiss to take some breaths. He broke the kiss and looked into her eyes. His eyes were red and one of them was wet. Fine. Are you okay? Jungkook. Why didn't you tell me that before? I was worried I did something wrong. Worried that I might have hurt you. Vine cut him off when she punched him on the chest. Why would you hurt me, silly? You never do anything like that, she said mockingly, but when she looked at his tear, her smile disappeared. Vine, are you really okay? Jungkook. Thank you, Vine. Vine, for what? Jungkook. For taking care of me. Vine. It's not a big deal. Why are you crying, silly? Jungkook. It is a big deal for me, he said and hugged her, trying to hide his tears. But she could feel them on her shoulders. Vine couldn't believe he was crying on such a small thing. Isn't it her responsibility to take care of him? But it's really a big deal for Jungkook, considering someone cared for him for the first time. Vine, stop crying now. Help me with making dinner in return. Jungkook laughed. Deal. They broke the hug and started cooking. Jungkook would occasionally steal a quick kiss on her cheek, making her laugh, and Vine would flick water at him whenever he got too close. Finally, the meal was ready. They stood back, admiring their handiwork. Fine, let's taste it, she said, looking at the food, unable to control herself from eating it. She took a spoon filled with soup and moaned. Fine, this is so good, she said while stuffing her mouth with it. Jungkook laughed. The day's long stress that he had was melting temporarily. And he took a spoon as well. Jungkook. Wow. Fine. Get aside. I can't wait, she said and immediately started pouring it and a plate for herself. She kept eating even when her mouth was so full. Jungkook looked at her, admiring her from his place. Jungkook, fine, fine. Hmm, she said without looking at him. Jungkook, I love you, Vine.